Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Winning Digital Customers Show. I'm Howard Tiersky. Today we're going to be talking about the digital workplace. With COVID, our trend towards remote work has been accelerated. Even before that, of course, our ability to effectively work together digitally as part of typical kind of corporate work, shall we say, enterprise work, has been growing and growing over the last number of years. I remember back in the 90s, the whole discussion of we need the paperless office. You know, today that sounds so antiquated. We not only have we gotten rid of most of the paper, but now we're getting rid of the office, right? So we don't need the paperless office anymore. The whole idea of the paperless office is a little bit like that old AT&T commercial where they used to say, for those who remember 25 years ago, AT&T would run these futuristic commercials that said, will you ever send a fax from the beach? And then it was like, you will. And it's like, yeah, no, I won't. I'm going to send a text from the beach. I don't need to send a fax. I'll take a picture of something and send that. No more faxes. So anyway, point being, the whole idea of how we create a digital workspace so that we can collaborate and communicate and work together with our entire company and our customers and our extended ecosystem has been important for some time and is only more important in COVID as we're getting rid of more offices and we're getting rid of more conference rooms and we're getting rid of more file cabinets and whiteboards and water coolers. It becomes even more and more important that we have strong tools and processes to enable our teams to work together effectively. So today we're going to talk about the 9 key components of the digital workspace, or the digital workplace, as you like. And so I'm going to go through 9 components. But before I do, I just want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, what are these components? Well, there's a different categories of tools for things like, mainly for 4 things. For communication and collaboration, let's count that as one thing. For tools to do your job, that's a second thing. Access to data and information that you need, that's a third thing. And I've forgotten the 4th thing, but I'm going to remember it as we go through. I should have made a slide of the 4 things. Sorry about that. In any case, though, I'll remember it before we get to the end. So there's some suspense, right? If you want to know the 4th thing, you got to stay tuned until the end. Okay. So 2 things I want to say about this, or maybe 3, before we dive into what those 9 things are. So, what are the keys to success in having this set of tools for your digital workspace? Well, first of all, you got to have the right tools. And we're going to talk through the 9 categories, and you probably need at least one tool in each of these 9 categories. If any of these categories are missed, you're probably going to have a big gap. In addition, you want to think about consistency in practices. And I'll talk about this in more detail as we go through the 9 areas with some examples. But if everyone in your company is using a different tool, or if every department is using a different tool for a key one of these 9 areas, you're probably going to have a problem. You're usually better off if everyone in your company is on Zoom, great. If half of your company's on Zoom and a third is on WebEx and the rest are using Microsoft Teams for video conferencing, it's probably going to suboptimize the way your overall digital workplace works together. And it's probably more important than you have something that everyone's using consistently than whether one is better than the other, whether WebEx is better than Teams, is better than GoToMeeting, is better than Zoom. Now, there may be some exceptions to that rule where individual groups should have something separate, but a broader rule is consistency is better than perfection. And practices. What that means is how you use the tools. It's not just about having each of these 9 categories that I'm going to go through, but let's just take something like video conferencing, what I call real-time communication. What are your tools for real-time communication? And of course, these days, historically, that's things like the phone, but increasingly that is things like the suite of tools that I just mentioned, Zoom and its competitors. And so, it's one thing to have the right tool. That's important, a platform everyone can use, and some standards and practices for how that's used. And coincidentally, I wrote a whole book about this called Impactful Online Meetings, which is all about how to have effective online interactions through conferencing platforms, whether that's just a staff meeting or whether that's a full-day workshop. You're bringing 50 people together to define the requirements for your new product. So if you want to check that out, you can find that on Amazon, Impactful Online Meetings. There's a whole bunch of practices in there. My purpose today is not to go through the practices, but just to say for each of these categories, it's not just what you use, but how you use it. And then the second thing is integration. So we have these 9 areas we're going to talk about, but how they work together is as important as having the right tools. And we're going to talk about some examples as we go through about how one can hand off to the other in a way so that even if you have all 9 of these things, they don't just feel like 9 separate and discrete things, but they work together. So probably best shown through some examples. So let's dive in. So the first example, which I already alluded to, the first of our 9 areas is real-time communication. You're going to want some kind of a platform or maybe a couple of platforms for different types of real-time communication. For example, you may have a video conferencing platform, and some companies also have some sort of VoIP platform for just voice communications. Although my opinion is increasingly those things are going to unify, and we're going to find that there's just one platform the companies are using within an enterprise, whether they're just trying to call their colleague and have a quick conversation or whether they want to get 20 people together on a video conference. But for the moment, I think many organizations still have some kind of traditional phone line, and they also are some kind of a method where someone can call someone on their cell phone or whatnot and have it automatically routed to where they are, and also some type of video conferencing platform. So that's probably an obvious one. And you know what? All of these may be obvious in a way. I'm a big believer in having a model whenever you're looking to solve a problem. So if you're trying to make sure that your company has an effective digital workplace, what I want to offer you today is, hey, look at these 9 categories. Go through them individually and ask yourself, do we have the right tool? Do we use it consistently? Meaning, do we have ideally one across everybody in the enterprise that needs to use it versus a diverse set? Do we have good practices and standards around how it's to be used so we're maximizing the use of it? And is it integrated with other tools and platforms that we have? And I'll talk again about some examples going forward. So let's move forward. There's your first one, video conferencing. So the next one is non-real-time. And actually, I should say the first one is real-time communication, and video conferencing is an example of that. Communicating while people are, doing it at the same time. The second is non-real-time communication. So historically, one of our most important non-real-time communications platforms has been email, right? I can send you an email. You can look at it when you're ready, hopefully soon, but not necessarily at the same moment that I'm sending the email. But of course, increasingly what we're finding is that in many companies, people have email overload, and platforms like Slack and competitors to Slack have become popular. And if you're not familiar with Slack, you probably are, but it is a tool which allows channels of communication. So an individual in a company can be subscribed to a whole bunch of channels, and a channel is basically just a chat stream. So if I'm working on 8 different projects with different people in the company, I may be subscribed to 8 different channels, one for each project that I'm working on. And then as people have questions or comments or updates, they can put those messages in the Slack channel rather than, for example, email them out to everybody. And that way everyone can see what's been sent. People can comment or update on it, and the comment and the dialogue can be seen by everybody, and it's preserved in one place. If you're like me, you have tens of thousands of emails that come in, and later finding an old email thread can be very challenging. Whereas in Slack, it keeps it more organized. And in my company, for example, we've decided not to use Slack, and we actually use Skype in a very similar way. Skype has the same idea where you can have different discussions going on with different people in them. You can be members of different discussions. So you don't have to use Slack, but I think most companies that are doing a lot of digital workplace stuff today are using some kind of sort of threaded discussion, non-real-time communication platform. And this is an example where, if you remember, I mentioned integration earlier. Slack as a platform is great for integrating with many other things. So certainly if I have a Zoom call going on, I can post that in Slack. Someone can click right out of Slack into Zoom. But there's other forms of integration. If I have a scheduled tasks, for example, those can be integrated with Slack. And as I move through some of these other categories, the more we talk about, the easier it is to talk about this idea of how they work together. So that's the second category, is some kind of a non-real-time communications platform. The third is real-time collaboration, as distinct from real-time communication. So what do we mean by real-time collaboration? Well, we mean something like a shared whiteboard or some other kind of tool that lets you do more than just talk and be seen. For example, in my company, we mostly use Google Docs for this. And this is fantastic because people can get on a call together or a Zoom or whatever, but also bring up a spreadsheet or also bring up a Google Slides presentation or also bring up a document and take notes. 15 people can all be adding content into the same document at the same time. And you can do that during a call, but you can also do that in real time if you're not even on some sort of a Zoom conference call. For example, sometimes folks in my company will be working to prepare a presentation that we have to give. Maybe it's even one of these live casts, and there could be 3 or 4 people working on it. One person's researching statistics, one person's finding stock photos to put into the deck, another person, maybe proofreading it, making sure everything's spelled correctly. And they're all doing that at the same time in the same deck, if you will. Not like the old days where one person had the PowerPoint file. We also use other tools, for example, like Miro, which is a shared whiteboarding kind of mind mapping type tool. So there's a variety of tools out there that allow this, but this is very, very valuable so that people can collaborate on the same thing at the same time without needing to be in the same place. This is in part a substitute for something like a whiteboard or just a big piece of paper that multiple people are working on at the same time. So that's our third category, real-time collaboration, which can be done while you're using real-time communication, but not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. The fourth category is something for work management. Work management means like a project management tool and a task management tool, something that allows you to say, okay, what am I working on? What is Bob working on? What is Sally working on? What is Jane working on? Who's supposed to get what done by the end of the day? What's the status of those activities? Is something completed, not completed? Those types of things. And so there's a whole bunch of different competing products out there. Jira, Asana, Workday, Trello, many, many tools, and they all have many things in common. You create categories for different types of projects, for example, that need to be done. You can define tasks, you can assign them to different people, and everyone has a place they can go to see what they're supposed to be doing. This is especially in a non-digital workplace. This might be the equivalent of like a blackboard or a cork board where people are moving cards around, or something else that indicates a whiteboard to say who's being assigned to work on what. So, but of course, it can be much more sophisticated than that because you can't sort and filter a physical whiteboard or chalkboard, things like that. And it's especially important, though, when people are working remotely, when people are working in a digital workplace, because you don't have the ability to all look back at that same board and know what's going on. So this gives something that anyone can look at on their phone, anyone can look at on their laptop or whatnot, and understand what they're supposed to be doing, what other people are supposed to be doing. And if they're managing people or they're counting on other people, they can look and see what's the status of any particular assignment that someone's been given. Are they working on it right now? Have they hit a roadblock? Do they need to speak to someone tomorrow? And so nothing's going to happen until the end of the day tomorrow. You can get that information quickly without having to email everybody, without having to ask direct questions. And by the way, a subset of work management platforms would be things like ticketing systems. So if I have a problem with my computer and I need to request help from somebody on the, in our technology team, I can go in and I can say, create a new ticket. This is my problem. This is the help that I need. And essentially I've assigned them a task. So that's just one small subset of the broader topic of having a tool that allows everyone in your organization to understand what everybody's working on, what they're working on, and what the status of things are. So that's work management. I think that was our fourth category. And in our company, for example, we mostly use Jira for this purpose. We create Jira issues, we assign them to people, and we can see the status of what's been done. The fifth category, another perhaps obvious category, but one that is an important part of our sort of 9-part system of digital workplace tools, is scheduling. And the number one type of scheduling application people think of would be something like a Google Calendar, like Outlook or Google Calendar, that sort of thing. And that is certainly in knowledge work type businesses, typical enterprises. This is the number one type of scheduling that people tend to use for scheduling things like meetings. Of course, in other environments, there's other kinds of scheduling software which is used, which still fall in this category. For example, if you're running a restaurant, you probably have software for scheduling shifts and scheduling vacations. And if people trade shifts, they go into that software and they say, oh, I've switched the shift. There's a product, for example, called When I Work, which is a very popular kind of a digital age tool for scheduling people who are having to schedule shifts, things like that. If you have a factory or something like that, you may have scheduling software that controls what's running on the line at a particular point in time. If you're a logistics company, you may have scheduling software that's scheduling not just people, but other things, other assets, things like trucks or forklifts or things like that. So there's a variety of, there's a whole category of software here or platforms around scheduling, but this is clearly one key component. If you're going to be able to, and again, this is another thing which in an old school world might have been handled by a big, whiteboard on the wall, and now we need the digital version of it, and it's critical for people to be able to collaborate using a tool like that, because people are going to need to know, when can I use the conference room? When can I schedule something on the printing press? When do I need to be somewhere? If I need somebody else to do something for me, when are they available? If I need to make sure I have enough people to run the store next Wednesday because there's a sale, I can go in and see what's been scheduled and who's available, et cetera. So scheduling is one of our key components. And again, by the way, let me go back to that and just make the point that it's not just the tool, but it's the consistency of how it's used. If people aren't consistently scheduling conference rooms, and sometimes they have meetings and they don't schedule a conference room in the calendaring system, then other people think that they can use the conference room, so the whole thing falls apart. So for any one of these categories, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not just having the right tool, but making sure you have the processes in place that people are following to really maximize the use of that tool. And that there's few topics that's even more true of than file storage and management. Despite the fact that we do so much in the cloud and we use things like Google Docs, there's still a lot of files that are part of doing business today, whether that's Excel files or Microsoft Word files or graphics files or sound files or video files, or, depending on your business, you may have a variety of X-ray, X-ray files if you're in the medical profession, and goes on and on, right? So making sure that you have not only a tool set, such as a Google Drive or a Dropbox or some sort of on-prem hosted file sharing system like those that are built into Windows or Apple iCloud. There's many different flavors of that out there, but having some commonly used method for storing files and retrieving files that everybody's using consistently is so critical. And it goes beyond just what tool you're using, but how you structure your directories within that, how you name them, how you name your files, how you handle versioning of files. If someone creates a new version of the old file, what do they do? Do they just overwrite it? Do they give it a new name? Do they add v3 at the end? Does the old ones go in a subdirectory? When it's one of those things that's not the most fun thing in the world to manage, at least not for me. But when you have that organized, it makes it so much easier for everybody to work together. And when it's a mess, people can spend hours looking for things. So, having, of course, a search tool that sits on top of these types of file storage mechanisms is also super helpful. So you can search within PDFs or search within PowerPoint files, so that if your structure fails you and you can't find the right thing through the hierarchy, you have another way to look for the possibly finding what you're looking for. But keeping things organized and having the right process is probably 10 times more important than the decision of whether you use Dropbox or Google Drive or something else. They all work very similarly. Of course, some have pros and cons, but the more important question is, how are we using it? Are we setting it up in a way that's consistent and makes it easy for everyone to use? Okay, the next one is customer records. So, of course, the nature of every business is a little different, and the kind of data and information that people need to do their jobs can be different. But there's very few businesses in which having information about customers is not quite important. Customer records could be anything from who are our customers, what is their name and contact information, what have they ordered, when is it supposed to go out, what's been shipped, have they opened a ticket, we have to do something for them, has it been completed, etc. And of course, this is another example where we have integration, right? Because if a customer needs some work done, then you want to know in the customer record that there's an open request, but also you want something in the task management system, right? Whether you're using Jira or Asana or something else, this is, Howard has now been assigned to solve this problem for that customer. So there's a point of integration, by the way. If there's a file that I need for that, then potentially I want to make it easy so that file, maybe it's a photo of the customer's air conditioning unit that's not working, and my job is to fix the air conditioning unit, that file is also easily accessible to me. So now you can start to see, as we've gone through some more of these areas, how these different components start to come together. And it may be that there's a message that pops up in Slack about this that's automatically generated by the work management system. And then maybe I need to be scheduled for a time that I'm going to go to this person's house to repair their air conditioning unit, and that goes into the calendaring system. So you can start to see how one request from a customer to fix an air conditioning unit may actually wind up hitting 5 or 6 of these systems. And if it's well integrated, instead of somebody having to go into each of these different systems and sort of copy paste information and put the same thing in multiple places, when systems are well integrated, a request can come in, it can automatically be connected to the customer record, automatically connected to the file, automatically create an appointment in the scheduling system. This is really the best practice. This is the future. And as you continue to mature your digital workspace capabilities for your company, you want to be looking at, do I have the right tools in these 9 areas? Do I have the right processes? And then how do they work together? And is there more that I can do to make things work together in a better way, which will make the whole thing work in an even better way? Okay, we're nearing the end of our 9 areas, actually. The next is HR tools. And I'm not going to say a ton about this, except to say that clearly for any employee, they need to be able to access things that pertain to their pay, to their benefits, to their vacation time, to their performance plans, all these types of things. And so this is just another category of important information and tools that any employee is going to need. And of course, you want to enable that digitally rather than forcing someone to go find and walk into the HR department's office or call HR. A digital workspace is not requiring people to have that kind of person-to-person communication for rudimentary requests, for basic information requests. Of course, there are times naturally in HR and in many other areas where you want to speak to someone, you want to connect with someone, and that may be very well when you're using your video conferencing platform, for example, or you have a Slack channel for people in HR to answer questions, things like that. But before you even use those, most organizations are going to want to have a consolidated place, a portal, if you will, for HR tools for all employees. Connected to that, but much larger than just HR, is some kind of a tool, a library. In other words, a tool that allows you to keep repositories of information. That's a little different from file management. Of course, some of your files may contain information as well, but this is a place where you keep things like your standard operating procedures, your policies. That can be everything from HR policies to, here's what's supposed to happen every night at the factory when we shut down. Here's how we shut down the equipment. Or, here's our process when we initiate a new client project. Here are the steps that we go through. Here's how we bring a new client on board, or whatever it may be. And in fact, again, when we talk about integration, it may be that you have content in your library that explains the processes that are meant to be used for many of these other components of the digital workplace as well. Many companies use some sort of a wiki tool, like Confluence from Atlassian, for example, for this. Another commonly used tool is SharePoint, a place that people can post key documents that pertain to how the business is operating, how things are done, or other kinds of data or information that people need to access in order to do their jobs. Not necessarily the HR side of it, although it could include that, but also just the day-to-day, what do I need to do whatever my job is. So those are the 9 areas. And as you can see, they kind of fall into some of these key different categories. There are tools, there are collaboration and communication components, there are tools that relate to sort of accessing data, et cetera. And they overlap, right? Many of these tools sit in multiple of those areas. They're not just, well, we have just the communications tools and we have the data access tools. You can see how some of these different tools do different things. So I would suggest within any organization, you want to ask yourself, you probably have something in each of these 9 categories. I think probably not too many organizations have, well, we only have 4 of these. You probably have, in fact, you may have multiple in some categories, but you might have a gap. You might have an area where you don't have something, or you don't have something being consistently used. So I think, again, the first step is to make sure you have the right tools. The second step is to make sure that you have the right processes. You're using those tools in the optimal way. And that can include training people on those tools and how those tools are meant to be used within your organization. And then lastly, looking to figure out how you can integrate those tools in the best possible way so the whole system works together as seamlessly as possible. So that is my set of recommendations, my model, if you will, for thinking about the digital workplace. Hopefully that's been helpful to you. As always, thank you so much for watching and or listening, and look forward to seeing you in another episode of the Winning Digital Customers Livecast. Until next time, keep transforming.